Why, hello there. My name is Trevor Vaughn, and before we get into the interviews, I just wanted to give a quick little prelude and say I interviewed two of my good high school friends who are Mexican American, and I asked them about any inequities or discrimination they may have faced at any time throughout their educational journey. The first interview discusses discrimination in college, and the second discusses it in primarily elementary school and a little bit of high school. Because this podcast is a bit lengthy, I've made chapters for the video so that it's easier to skim through the major points of the podcast. I hope our conversations are insightful and you enjoy. So without further ado, let's get into the interviews. Hello, I've got my friend Tony here, who I'm interviewing. Tony, if you would like to introduce yourself real quick, please.
Yeah, my full name is Anthony Alvarez. I'm a Mexican American studying computer science, entering my third year.
Perfect, perfect. So, I had asked you the other day if when I was trying to find someone to interview, I was curious if you would have any stories about any discrimination, racial discrimination you've experienced at all in K through 12 or college. And I have to say, I was actually kind of surprised to hear that you said you do have some stories to share. So, um, if do you have multiple stories, or is it like one circumstance that you could recall?
I think it's like multiple. None
Mm-hmm.
of them are like any huge like instances of like discrimination. They're more like subtle, maybe inadvertent.
Mm-hmm. No, I got
Yeah,
you.
but
That's
all right,
that's
all right.
important. That's important. So if you would please walk me through the first one.
Yeah, so I'd say I've experienced more discrimination in college than I have in high school. I feel like the high school that we attended was like predominantly Hispanic, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore like I was just another Hispanic. I didn't really see any difference there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the university that I currently attend, that's not the case anymore. There's a very low Hispanic population. It's like predominantly, I think, white and Asian American.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, oh, should I speak on the instances now?
Yeah, yeah. If you yeah, if you could share one of the instances you've experienced.
Yeah, I think a lot of them came early on. Most of them came early on,
Mm.
like when everyone was kind of mingling and getting to know each other when we like first arrived at school. There was like for some reason a lot of comparison with like stats and like what did you do to get here, and
Uh
like
huh.
um yeah, I feel like my stats weren't as crazy as other people, and when I would kind of tell them, a lot of people would just like boil it down to like, oh well, like yeah, of course, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we know why you got in, right? Like
Yeah, like oh, you're Mexican. That gave you like extra points to
yeah.
get in. I got you.
So it was like a lot of that. So like I would talk to people. I don't know why they were so obsessed with stats, but yeah, I would talk to people. A lot of them would like go that route.
Uh huh.
And then also in just like in like the field of CS there, I feel like it's very competitive and
Mm.
like everyone is kind of like silently competing with one another. So like when it wasn't so silent and they like asked like, oh, like how's internship hunting going, or like, oh, have you found like a job or this or that? Um, I remember one time like specifically when I was in one of my labs for 61B, um, like some one kid I didn't even know was like asking me if I had found an internship yet, and then we just continued on for a while, and then I think at one point he says like, I feel like you should just apply, like you're Mexican, so I'm pretty sure like they just kind of give it to you.
He really
You know what I mean?
said
So
that?
yeah, it was like because it was during one of the projects where I was like, dang, like I don't think like I'll finish this. I wanted to put on my resume, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to finish it. And then he was
Mm-hmm.
just like, he's like, oh, like it doesn't really matter. Like if you just apply, you'll probably get it. Like they're looking for like Hispanics or like I don't remember the exact words he said, but it was basically it was pretty blunt.
Yeah, I got you. He sounded like he was very jealous or something like that if I had to take a guess, but that's did you know this guy at all? Or
No, 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 it was like I just met him during that conversation. He didn't
what?
start with that. It was
No,
like a ten
I
minute long
figure,
conversation.
but even still, I'm surprised he I guess he's just very blunt with it, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel like um they kind of see it as like an advantage. So like,
Mm,
why would it be offensive? You know, because
mm-hmm,
that's like happened a few times actually. Like you should just apply. Like they're like looking for like more diverse. No,
mm-hmm.
maybe I will. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get that a lot. Like you'll probably get in easier because you're Hispanic or because like you're Mexican.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Um, do you feel like your peers and like, yeah, I'll start with peers. Do you feel like your peers have like a lower expectation of you because of that? Like, do you think they expect clearly some of them expect you'll have an easier time getting an internship simply because of I guess like diversity checks, it sounds like is what they're talking about. Um, but do you ever feel like your peers expect lesser work from you, or like a project they expect you won't do as much? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, so I'd say that a lot of them do have like prejudice,
Mm,
a lot of like preconceived notions. I think one of yeah. So I remember in one of my data classes, um, like we had to like pick partners and things like for projects, and it was after like a month of the class. Like we had already taken our first midterm, and like scores were back, so the class kind of got to like know each other.
mm,
Um, and I can't blame it solely on like discrimination. It might have been like other factors, but I actually did really well in the midterm. I think I was like I got like within like the top like 10% of like the grades
mm,
for that midterm. So I actually did pretty good. But when we were going around picking partners, yeah, I just like people like next to me who weren't Hispanic would be asked like, oh, like do you want to be like partners? You know, like there was no previous connection between like people, and it was just a little hard to find like
mm-hmm.
partners in these
Yeah,
classes where like there was like a lack of Hispanics.
yeah, I got you. No, that's a good point you make actually. I hadn't thought about that. Um, I'm curious. It seems like so far a lot of these interactions you've had are with peers. Have you experienced this from your teachers and like staff at all?
I'd say I don't think I have. I feel like the school I go to is like they try very hard to be like inclusive,
Mm,
and I think like we rarely get to see the teachers. It's one of like the bigger schools, so like every class has like 200 kids, so like very rare interactions with teachers, and then
yeah.
um most of the time TAs just like do their job, you know, like they help who needs help. So it's
Mm,
mostly just been my fellow peers.
I got you. So that's great to hear. Obviously, I think it. I was kind of expecting the opposite. Honestly, I was expecting because it seems like a lot of the youth these days is a lot more left leaning and I guess charitable to multiculturalism, and so I was expecting it to be like teachers you had. So it's really interesting to hear like kind of it seems like the competitive nature of the school, as you were saying, like kind of brings out these racist ideas in people, like these or these like it's kind of like an unconscious bias it seems they have, which is
Yeah, it's like it's it's definitely like inadvertent, you know, like they don't really mean to do it.
yeah.
But I know that like a lot of the kids who attend like this university come from like the same schools, you know, and those schools are
Mhm.
from like wealthier areas, and wealthier areas lack Hispanic
Mhm.
people. So I think it's like kind of rare to see a Hispanic there, especially in like computer science.
Mhm.
So I definitely think like they have like these notions in the back of their mind, like even if they might not like think it
Mhm.
immediately, like it's definitely sitting there and it affects like decisions that they make, like when choosing partners or like how they see people like applying for internships or just like any opportunity. I feel like is like there's already this bias there.
Mhm. Yeah, I got you. Um, I'm curious. In my mind, I don't know for sure, but I feel like there could be uh, a lot of racism that can be found in like the computer science major. I could be wrong, but I think it's a predominantly like white male dominated field. Um, and so I'm curious if you've felt any, discrimination towards your race in just like your computer science classes or like in your pursuit of internships, things like that.
Yeah, so I I don't think I've experienced like outright racism.
Mm,
You know, I think my school, if they crack down on that very hard, you know, if like someone gets like reported for being racist, it's like a very big deal. So I
yeah.
think like everyone avoids that, like they kind of tiptoe. Because I know some of them like not at Berkeley or like in their own private groups are like racist. Um, but like no one is ever like outwardly, at
Mm.
least not on purpose. Like I said, like there's always like these inadvertent biases. Um, my bad. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, that's I mean that basically answers my question. I was asking if in the computer science major and field if you've experienced like you were saying you know that there are implicit biases that people have. Um, I was asking if that, like I said, that answers the question. If you, there, it sounds like you haven't experienced any blatant racism where someone's like, "Oh, a Mexican in computer science," you know, that hasn't
Yeah.
happened, right? Right?
No, it hasn't. Not until right now.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean it.
No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, I think actually I am remembering a little bit of what you said. Yeah, I feel like it is very like white male dominant and um Asian American dominant,
Mm-hmm.
and then like once again, a lot of the communities that like feed to this school are these wealthier communities, and like so like these groups of people have grown up around themselves. I feel like it kind of creates this like sort of like echo chamber, like it like reaffirms their ideas, right? Like if they
Yeah.
didn't grow up around any like other people, you wouldn't have the same like you wouldn't see them at the same level as you.
Mm-hmm. I got you. So,
Like of course it's not like out there, it's like in the back of your mind, you know, like
mm-hmm.
always chilling there.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Um, I know you're saying that you don't really think you've experienced too much racism, if that you could discern in high school, which is a good thing. Um, I'm curious though if you felt like in high school or even currently in college. Actually, I think would be better for me to ask. Uh, in college, you said you feel like teachers are a lot more inclusive and aware of the racial issues and everything. And so I'm curious if
Mm.
you feel like teachers have made efforts to like integrate your culture into the curriculum in any way, or if they've been more open to uh, yeah, I guess like I said before, if they've integrated your
Mm.
culture at all, or if they're just and I don't want to say just, but if they're more aware of it exclusively.
Yeah, I'd say more on the they're more aware side than
Yeah.
like including my culture in there. I don't think my culture has been included in any of the classes.
Mm,
But I do think that they make an effort, whether it be the professor or an order from like the higher ups to
mm,
like change the curriculum. But I've noticed like in a lot of my classes, they address like these kind of inequities.
yeah.
Like it's like it'll be like the first assignment is like take this test, and it's like one of those fake scenario tests where it's like Jimmy tells Ryan like we won't take you into our group because like you're a different color than us. Like is this bad? You know, and then you answer like true or false. You know, so it's one of those like not it makes like an effort, but like kind of like a half-assed type effort. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you. So then I'm curious, do you think you would benefit at all from more inclusion of your culture in that curriculum, or even just like uh I guess you don't speak too much Spanish, but you speak a lot of like household Spanish with your parents, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think less than inclusion in the culture, maybe just like, I mean, inclusion in like the classes, maybe just like inclusion in the community.
Mhm.
I think, um, I don't think including like my community or like integrating it into the classes would help at all because I feel like they're pretty like on a specific topic, and I don't know how they would
Mhm.
really include cultures, but I feel like just a larger community of like Hispanics would help a lot because it's just hard to find like people who look like you. You know what I mean? Like after a while, it gets like a little tiring that like you look around and there's no one like you.
Mhm.
Um, but no, yeah, I don't think like inclusion of my culture into like a class would necessarily help me. I can't speak for other people, but like I think in my own opinion, I don't think it would really affect how I learned.
No, I got you. That's fair. That's fair. I think it's kind of hard to think about how that would be integrated into the culture, right? Like for example, it's pretty easy to think about that with like a history class. Like you just start studying more Mexican American I guess like uh what's the word God, like
You
rights
got it.
activists. Yeah, thank you, thank you. My brain was blanking. Or like Chicano culture, like the Bracero program, stuff like that. But with STEM oriented classes, it's a bit harder to think of how to incorporate that. I wonder, like, I mean, maybe it's not the best effort, but like, for example, maybe something where you're programming like something for a radio station. Instead of it being just like some blank slate radio station, it could be like, God, I was gonna say
Say it.
Telemundo, but Telemundo is television. So I there could be like interesting inclusions of other
Yeah.
cultural things or like the context of what you're working on can include it, but like you said, maybe that doesn't add too much to it, but I don't know,
You know
do you?
what? Actually,
Yeah.
I now that you say that, I'm thinking back on. I feel like I have had a class that like didn't directly include culture, but like talked about like a lot of like injustices
Mm-hmm.
surrounding like a lot of these cultures. It was one of my data classes, and a lot of the assignments, which was actually really cool, were kind of centered around like solving cases with data and like proving that they were not racist, but like at least um, ooh, I'm forgetting the word, like lack of
Awareness.
oh man, no, it's like lack of representation in
Oh,
like
okay.
so I think in one of the assignments we did for data was like a court case.
Mm.
Um, and in this court case, it was they were sentencing African American man to like life in prison for something.
Mm.
And then like the jury though was like predominantly like white male. But I think like based off of some law, I don't know the law, it's my bad, but like based off of like some law, it's
Mm.
supposed to be like uh correct, like the jurors I think are supposed to be like a correct representation of the population. Um, so like by like using data and like by sampling, we found out that like the population that was chosen for that like jury
Mm.
like would happen less than like 0.0001% of the time. So it kind of proves that like
Really?
it was like a kind of I mean I'll just say it was kind of like racist, you know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like they were purposely leaving out like people of color, like like people of different sexes as a means to like sentence this guy,
Uh-huh.
which was so we've had like a few assignments like that in that class, like where we just
Interesting.
kind of solve these things. Yeah, like talking about like how like using data we kind of uncover that like these things have been unfair and that they were unfair.
Mm.
So yeah, I'd say that class did like a good job, kind of like combining not culture but like bringing up the inequities and how
Yeah.
like we can use data to like kind of solve these.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And I think additionally like that sort of assignment I think helps to dismantle some of the unconscious biases people have that they don't realize. I think assignments like that can really help to bring down those walls and like allow people to think more introspectively about some of their biases they might not originally see, I guess. But
Yeah,
hey,
definitely.
that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that, Tony. But this is we've done plenty of time, so thank you so much for your time, Tony. And do you
Yeah.
have anything else you want to say, or it's okay if not?
Ooh. I mean, I guess I'll just say like I'm only speaking on my own experience. I hope that if anyone else hears this, they know I'm not speaking on their experiences. Like I'm positive people have like worse or better experiences or don't experience the same thing or have different opinions, and I just want to say like this is my own experience and my own opinions.
Of course, and there's it's important to hear a bunch of opinions, which is why I have your opinion here. It's important. So thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me.
of course, that's the end. Hello, this is the second interview of the podcast. For the listeners, this is one of my best friends, Christian Sanchez, who is a Mexican American attending CSUN, that is California State University of Northridge, and he's going into his fourth year as a mathematics major with a minor in secondary education. Say hello, Christian.
Howdy, howdy.
There he is. Is there anything else you would want to mention for your intro, or did I nail it?
That's pretty much it. I mean,
Perfect, perfect. So, I had messaged you the other day when I was
right.
trying to find some people to interview for this, and I had asked if you had any stories you could share. And I honestly, I don't know why I said the same thing with Tony, but I was kind of surprised to hear that you had some stories, which probably speaks to some of my ignorance, but. Nonetheless, I would love. I believe you mentioned that your stories are from elementary school, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So if you could, please share.
Uh, the first instance I could recall of getting discriminated against, um, during it's not even elementary. It first started for sure when I was in preschool,
Really?
where yeah, because in that I had this like it was like blonde hair, the basic blonde
Yeah.
hair like preschool teacher,
Mhm. Mhm.
and for me, growing up in a Latino household, I only here at home I spoke Spanish, and over at school I would speak English.
Mhm.
However, during this time period, this is still where I was transitioning from Spanish to English, where Spanish was the first language, whereas English was my second. Um, what would what this teacher would do is every once in a while she would go to some of the students' homes just to like chat up with the parents, say, "Oh, this is their progress," blah blah. And I know there's a couple times where she's done that, coming over to my place and doing so.
Mhm.
Where in one instance, I do not remember it myself, but I do know because my mom told me.
Mhm.
Where in one instance she said, with my progress, I wasn't progressing as much
Mhm.
as other students, because of my language barrier,
Mhm.
and with that, she made the biggest jump in judgment where she's like, yeah, because of this, he's going to be very, very behind in school. He's not going to go anywhere with this,
Mhm.
with this progress he's dealing with. Essentially, just saying, like, I'm basically, in layman's terms, she's basically just saying I was essentially dumb.
Yeah.
And my mom literally just told her, it's like, no, like, even though it's just, no, that's my kid.
Mhm.
He's not that dumb. No, he's good at school. It's just give him the time, you know.
Mhm.
But she's like, oh no, no. With the stuff he's turning in, he's just not picking up whatever this, and it's like, bro, I'm like, I'm like, what, 5, 6, and you're not giving the
Mhm.
5-year-old the chance to, still improve. It's still early stages.
Yeah.
As someone who's going into education, teaching, as a teacher, you shouldn't look down on a student because of a little bit of a language barrier. It's like,
Mhm.
give them a chance.
Absolutely. And honestly, I'm so glad that I have you to interview because you have such a good perspective for this, seeing as, you're learning to be a mathematics teacher. Um, what you were just describing is a huge phenomenon that we discussed in the class a ton about, like, um, there are a lot of Spanish speaking students who wrongly get put into special needs courses because exactly what you were describing, where the teacher thought you were like behind on learning and stuff. But really, the issue was just that they weren't teaching you, and like not only they probably weren't giving you enough time, right?
Right.
Like you're describing, as you're a young kid, like everyone's learning at different paces, but as well, they probably weren't providing you with the correct resources to, like, for you to actually flourish, because at um you grew up in a Spanish speaking household, as you said, right? So I
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the English you learned was like through television and like talking to, other students and stuff, right?
Absolutely. I learned that's how I build English. I
Yeah.
learned through movies, shows, and just constantly switching between the two and
Yeah.
just build it from there. And here I am now.
Yeah, I got you. So exactly, exactly. So at that stage, it sounds like you were primarily speaking Spanish, right? If not exclusively.
For the most part, yeah. And the only times I only spoke English is just with my classmates.
Yeah, got you. So that's exactly the situation that we were discussing in class, where um, you obviously weren't of any special needs and you weren't behind. It's just that you were being taught, you were still having to learn the language that the curriculum was being taught in. And so there was, they're not supplying you. There's an opportunity gap there where you don't have the same resources and like base to build off of as the other students. And so the teachers have this bias, where like it's an implicit bias, I would say, where they think you're behind when you're probably even more ahead than the other students, because you're learning multiple languages and having to catch up on all this stuff. I shouldn't even say catch up, because it's not catching up, it's assimilation, right? Like
Mhm.
and that's one of my questions I'd like to ask you is, do you feel like throughout your like K through 12 education, you had to assimilate to the dominant culture and reject like your Mexican culture in order to succeed?
Oh, jeez. Um, Not in my personal experience, but for sure, like I have other
Mhm.
siblings where, and for both of them,
Yeah.
they for sure pretty much did that.
Mhm.
And as a Mexican American, as a Latino,
Mhm.
it's doing that is it's disrespectful. It's like you're neglecting your roots. It
Mhm.
feels very very hurtful, and we're the like playful people of our like ethnic background.
Mhm.
But and with like my case, I never dropped that. I always spoke Spanish at home, but English at school. But I never like gone up to mom and hit her like with Spanglish or just talk to her with only
Mhm.
English. I never had to do anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't have to. A lot of times, I never had to force my heritage to away or
Mhm.
push it down when I'm at school. A lot of times, I mean, especially in high school. Like in high school, I use Spanish. I use some Spanish slang
Yeah.
like que pedo, or helping helping you with some Spanish
Yeah,
phrases too.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um, and like even now, I think even like now I for sure still use a lot of the slang.
Mhm.
There's a lot of times where I have to speak. There's words that I forget in English. I'm like, damn, what's that called? And I just say it in Spanish. And if someone's there translate, they're like, oh, is that's what you're talking about? I was like, yeah, yeah, that thing. Because I tend to forget that.
No, I'm
So
so glad you mentioned that, actually, because that, you were saying how you taught me a lot of Spanish. That actually, I've always really enjoyed that. Uh, one specific example I can think of is when me, you, and Sam would hang out. I remember you're like great at Spanish and English. I've am apt at English, and I was learning Spanish, and Sam was probably more or less the same as you, but she seemed to be a little bit better at Spanish than she was in English, And
Yeah.
I remember there were a lot of times where we'd be talking, and she'd bring up something, a word or a phrase in Spanish that she didn't know the translation to, and so you'd kind of translate it to me. But I noticed a lot of the time there wasn't a perfect translation. Usually, this phrase or word has a specific connotation in Spanish that holds more meaning, and so I really enjoyed with our group. Um, since you guys would teach me this and everything, I really enjoyed this. Do you know what translanguaging is?
Jesus. No.
Don't worry, don't worry. It's a term that I've learned in this class, but it's essentially when someone uses their full linguistic repertoire to communicate. For example, Spanglish, right? That would be
Oh,
like
okay.
talking in English and Spanish, and that's what you and I do basically. Um,
Pretty
and I've always valued that. For example, you've taught me so many things. I say sana sana culita de rana all the time. I love that one.
much.
And my point that I was trying to get to is I think there's a very enriching experience and a lot of value to be held in conversations like that where people are able to communicate in multiple languages, and like not only for like the value in learning um, like new ways to communicate something, but also just like the sense of community and kind of like um at least for me it felt I'm not even I'm not even Mexican, but I felt like I belonged with you guys, conversing in multiple languages, it felt very I enjoyed that a lot is what I'm trying to say.
No, hell yeah, no. Like for me, like doing that is just it feels it's just inclusive.
Mm,
Just because it's just like it's a useful thing to do, and like knowing another language, especially Spanish, which is the second most
yeah.
spoken language on the planet. Um,
Really, I didn't know that.
I believe so. First one I know for sure is Chinese Mandarin. Second Spanish. I think third English.
Wow.
Um, but no, yeah, Spanish is very very important, especially in like states like California,
Mm,
Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, where it's predominantly Hispanics. Um, no, yeah, a lot of the slang I still use, and I still tell others who don't speak it at work. I know last year one of my managers, who's white, doesn't speak much Spanish.
mm.
Uh, I taught him the phrase "que pedo," which is again like how you
It's like
said, it
what's
has
up.
yeah, it has no direct translation. Where if you were to
Yeah,
directly
yeah.
translate it, it would be like "what fart." And
Yeah,
it's like in English, it's
exactly.
like that makes no sense.
Mhm.
But in Spanish, it's like oh, it's like "what's up,"
Yeah.
and we would just pretty much use it every time when I walk in and be like, "Hey, Brandon, what's up?" or "que pedo," and be like, "Oh, Christian, que pedo." And just doing that is it's even though it's a small like little detail, it
Mhm.
feels so good. Like knowing
Yeah,
that they're using the language that you use
absolutely.
and they're picking it up and using it themselves, and it's like feels great.
No, absolutely. So I'm curious, would you like to see more of that in like the school curriculum? Like imagine if teachers uh didn't shy away from like students communicating in both English and Spanish and whatever other languages they have. And like what if they even encouraged it in the classroom? Like do you think that that could be beneficial? Would you like to see that?
Oh no, absolutely. As someone's going to teaching,
Yes,
I I'm I'm
yes.
I'm for sure using that in my classrooms. I'd be like, all right, estudiantes, ¿qué pedo?
Yes. Yes, I
Just to
love
like
that.
stay laid back because I mean, obviously, my first semester of teaching, I'm for sure. First
Mhm.
semester is going to be nice, strict, straightforward. But second semester is where I'm starting to be like more laid back. And in that case, I'm for sure just you like still use some slang, uh, get that incorporated, and just goof like yeah, just goof around. Every once in a while, I'll be like, oh yeah, this word is this math problem right here. We could say this is Spanish, if you like, or if you need. or even if there's like transfer students too, that's the
Mm,
case. I could that's also very useful where it's like that they're not excluded either, where you can talk to them in whatever language they speak in.
mm. No, dude, this is honestly, I'm so happy and proud of you that you're going into this field because you're exactly what I think the education system needs. Because there's some this whole class is about figuring out what needs to change, and I think you're a perfect example of some initiatives that are being taken and can be done. So I have another question for you, Christian.
All right, lay it on me.
I'm curious if you feel like at any point in you said that you didn't have to shy away from your culture in the education system, but you know your siblings did. Um, do you feel like your culture was integrated into the curriculum at all, or the teaching, other than like Spanish class? Obviously, do you feel like it was integrated into like the STEM courses and history and stuff like that?
Oh, honestly, not really. Like, especially like a good very history. History, a lot of it is just mainly U.S. or
Mm-hmm.
like history, which I mean, yes, it's important, but I feel like a lot of it they ignore some facts. Where there's a lot of stuff where Latinos were involved, or even Native Americans, a lot of Native Americans involved, but a lot of it's just cut out or
Mm-hmm.
neglected, and so much so, honestly, I think I didn't even know who Caesar Chavez was until like high school,
Yeah. No,
and like
same here.
and same goes for like other histories. A good example is the this I feel like in all honesty, the poor way of tra- the poor way of showing the tradition of Cinco de Mayo
Mm.
in the U.S., where Cinco de Mayo, they, I would definitely say it's a little stereotypical how they treat it here in the U.S.
Mm.
Whereas in Mexico, Cinco de Mayo isn't necessarily, it's still something pretty big for us Latinos,
Mm.
where it gets confused with our actual Independence Day, where Cinco de Mayo is just a celebration of our of U.S. Mexico's dependence or independence from France, or
Yeah.
France wanted them, so we fought and revolted and basically won. That's
Mm.
Cinco de Mayo. However, our actual independence was in September 15th, and that right there is our Independence Day, and that one I only see Mexico talk about it, especially
Yeah.
in like news. It's like, oh, this is our Independence Day. We celebrate. However, in the U.S., that's almost not talked about a lot.
Mm.
Mainly Cinco de Mayo, which is like that makes really no sense. Whereas one's the actual independence, one's from a very important battle. Um, so history, U.S. history, like American history system, glosses over a lot of those facts.
Yeah.
Um, STEM doesn't really use a lot of Spanish a lot of times. Um, Even with medicine, I feel like a lot of do medicine is always a hard one, just because it's especially with the older generations who have Latinos who need medications. Like, yeah, I don't know how to say this medication in Spanish, or
Mm.
uh, and a lot of pharmaceuticals. Especially with I have like a Thea who has diabetes, who constantly has to call to get her refill on medication. Where a lot of the people who answer the calls tend to be non-Spanish speakers,
Mm.
where I have to jump in and translate, like, oh yeah, she needs this kind of medication, this
Yeah.
kind of medication, where that would also be very, very beneficial for us. That's something that I definitely like to see. But
Absolutely.
yeah, American education system, especially in my elementary to a good majority of high school, do not incorporate a lot of other languages like Spanish and other ones like that.
Mm.
But I generally do want like to see that more in the future, hopefully.
Yeah.
And but that's something that I definitely would like to do once I get more into the education system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so excited for that because like I said before, I don't want to make this, I don't want to blow too much smoke up your butt, but I think you are on track to make a lot of important changes, and I think you'll be a great teacher. But that aside, I think we've talked enough. Thank you so much, Christian, for the interview. I appreciate your time. Is there any last second thoughts you want to put out there? It's fine if not.
Yeah, no, that was good for me, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Christian. That this
No
is the
problemo.
end.